Welcome to the Thrive in Fashion Buying and Merchandising podcast, where we explore what it actually takes to build a successful career as a fashion buyer. The show covers the commercial skills, strategic thinking, and real-world knowledge that the industry expects of buyers, but that no one ever sits down and teaches you. If you want to think more commercially, progress more quickly, and feel genuinely confident in your role, this is the show for you. Your host is Elisabeth Mac Hale, a fashion buying and retail expert with over 25 years of industry experience, and someone who has hired, trained, and developed more than 100 fashion buyers across her career.
Every season, somewhere in a buying office, a buyer is looking at their numbers and trying to work out where it went wrong. The product that arrived in March when the weather was still cold and customers were not ready to buy, or the summer range that landed perfectly on time, but the Easter comparison was shifted by 2 weeks this year, and the first month of trading looked far worse than it actually was. Or the delivery that was pushed out by 6 weeks because of a factory delay, arriving just as the markdown cycle was starting. I've been in those conversations many times, and what I've noticed over again is that the problem rarely starts with the product itself. It starts much earlier in how the season plan was built in the first place. Seasonal planning looks straightforward on paper. You know what your budget is, you know the product categories that you need to buy, and you build a plan. But the plan is only as good as the assumptions behind it. And this is where most of the mistakes happen. Not so much in the execution, but in the planning. Welcome to the Thrive in Fashion podcast. I'm your host, Elisabeth Mac Hale, and this week is about seasonal planning mistakes, why they happen and what you can do about them at whatever stage of your buying career you are at right now. The most common seasonal planning mistake is building a plan based almost entirely on the previous year. Last year, spring traded well from the third week in March, so the plan this year assumes the same. Or last year, the summer sale started in the second week of July, so this year the markdowns are planned accordingly. The problem is that the previous year is a reference point, not a guarantee. And with trading conditions and consumer confidence being genuinely uncertain in many markets, the gap between what you plan for and what actually happens has become even wider. Say, for example, you build a beautifully logical seasonal plan. Every delivery is timed against the previous year's performance. Every option count calibrated to what had worked before, but what you have not built in is any tolerance for things running differently. And when a supplier pushes a delivery by 4 weeks due to production delays, there is no contingency plan or plan B. The gap that this creates in your range then becomes visible on the shop floor during your peak trading period. Good seasonal planning builds in tolerance, and it asks, what happens if this delivery is late? What happens if the weather doesn't behave the way it did last year or the way I expected to? What happens if the Easter comparison shifts and the first 4 weeks of trade look distorted? The answers to those questions need to be thought through and need to be in the plan before you need it, not afterwards. The next thing is treating the seasonal plan as something that you build once and execute rather than something that you monitor and adjust throughout the season. And I understand why this happens. Building a seasonal plan takes a lot of time and effort, and you may be reluctant to revisit it too many times once you have it done. But the trading season is not a static thing. Trade changes week by week. Consumer behavior shifts. And a product that looked really strong in pre-season testing may not start selling or appeal to the customer in the way that you had expected. A category that you planned conservatively might outperform. The best way to manage your seasonal buying most effectively is to treat your buying plan as a live document. Review it regularly against what trade is actually telling you, and make the adjustments while there is time for them to mean something. Don't wait until next year because things will have changed many more times again. And in practical terms, this means building a regular review time into your week. It doesn't need to be that elaborate, but looking at your key metrics, your sell-through by category, your intake versus planned, your stock depth against projected sales on a weekly basis will give you enough information to spot potential problems before they become a crisis. The alternative is finding out in a trade meeting that a category is running at 60% sell-through against a plan that required 80%, and there are 4 weeks left before the next delivery is about to hit. At that point, your options become limited. And if you had noticed it 6 weeks earlier, then you would have had time to do something about it. Another thing that is not talked about enough and causes more problems than you realize are those transitional periods in a retail calendar. Those weeks between one season ending and the next one beginning. And they are really hard to plan for. And to be honest, most of the times they're not planned for at all. They're frequently underplanned. End of summer into early autumn or post-Christmas into early spring. Those are the weeks in the trading calendar where your customer is really not fully committed to either season. And what often happens is that buyers will plan the core of each season really well, but leave that transition area maybe a little bit underplanned or under-resourced. So the summer range runs long and the early autumn stock is thin on the ground, or spring product arrives into stores, but the weather is still cold and customers are not ready to buy into that yet. And there's nothing to bridge the gap. Weather and product misalignment is one of the most consistent challenges in fashion buying, and it becomes most apparent in these transition windows, particularly if you are still buying to a strict traditional cycle. You cannot control the weather, but you can plan for the possibility that the product arriving will not match the conditions your customers are experiencing. Having a strategy for those transition periods, that product that sits between seasons or that works across a wider temperature range, that gives the customer a reason to buy before your full season offer feels right, is part of a really mature seasonal plan. The last thing I want to cover is something that tends to catch buyers out as they take on more financial responsibility. Your seasonal budget and your seasonal plan are not quite the same thing, although buyers may treat them as though they are, and this causes problems. Your budget is a number, and that tells you how much money you have to spend. That's it. Your seasonal plan, however, is different because it tells you how you're going to spend that money, when you're going to spend it, and what you expect to get back in return. It's really the breakdown and the story of how your season is going to trade week by week, category by category. What often happens is that a buyer's seasonal plan is really just a list of deliveries, of hit 1, hit 2, or drop 1. They know what's coming in and when, but they may not have mapped out how the season is actually going to trade. Which weeks are going to be stronger? What happens to the range in the transition between seasons when one category is winding down and the next has not landed yet? And without that sort of picture, your plan cannot tell you when something is going wrong. So you might be spending to budget, but the shape of your season is wrong. And you won't see that until it's too late to do anything about it. Think of it this way. Your budget will tell you how much money you have to work with, but the seasonal plan tells you exactly how you're going to use it week by week. And you need both. One without the other isn't really a plan at all. Building that seasonal picture captures both the money and the trading logic behind it. And it's one of the most useful skills a buyer can develop, because it is the difference between actually managing a season and just watching it happen. The things worth focusing on are developing your plan with some sort of tolerance built in, not just against last year. Remember to review it regularly and adjust it while you can. And give the transitional period some proper attention and understand the trading logic behind the numbers and not just the numbers themselves. Seasonal planning can get really technical and take time to learn and develop. The mistakes I described in today's episode are not signs that someone is not a good buyer, but rather signs that there are gaps in the skill set that are yet to be developed. And the things worth focusing on are developing your range plan with tolerance built in, not just against last year. Review it regularly and make the adjustments while you can. Think about those transition periods between seasons and how you can optimize sales. Understand the trading patterns behind your numbers and not just the numbers themselves. While you won't prevent a difficult season from being difficult, you will make sure that you can see any problems coming early enough to manage them. That's all for this week. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If it was useful, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who is working in buying or merchandising right now. It genuinely helps more people find the show. Check the show notes for links and resources on developing your buying skills further. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode, and see you next time.